Welcome. I'm Doug Morgan, and you're listening to Uncommon Sense, where we hunt for the truth in the topics you're not supposed to talk about, Christianity and politics. In our current political landscape, what role should government have is a valid question to ask. This level of debate is even taking place within the conservative movement. So the question to start out with, I think, should be, what is the biblical case for governments? Well, government is an institution established by God, of course. It's not a human intervention. That is clear in Romans 13:1. God set up government for a reason. And government is meant to punish bad behavior and reward good behavior to maintain social order. That's Romans 13:3 and 4. Government is to protect individual God-given rights. And government is to restrain evil. Because of human sinness, government acts as a necessary check to prevent chaos and violence. So what is post-liberalism? Well, post-liberalism is a political philosophy. It's critique that rejects classical and social liberalism. So it's not liberalism in itself. It rejects a lot of that, and it focuses instead on social cohesion. In other words, the common good. And it relies on a strong state role or strong government, kind of a top-down type of thing. And its core beliefs is that it has a rejection of individualism. It argues that putting personal choice above all else breaks down families and local cultures and social bonds. It really does stress the common good. It seeks to guide public policy toward shared moral and social health rather than, neutral individual rights. It supports an active government. It supports using the power of the state to protect traditional values and support working families and regulate destructive market forces and things like that. So if you look on the flip side of the coin, what is libertarianism? Well, libertarianism is a political philosophy that prioritizes individual liberty as its core principle and seeks to maximize personal freedom while minimizing the size and the scope of government. I mean, literally to almost nothing. They believe that there is very little purpose for government. Well, the problem with post-liberalism is that they view government as the solution to society's problems. As Thomas Sowell once said, there is no solutions. There are only trade-offs. The point he is making is that human beings cannot create a perfect utopian fix for complex societal problems. Every policy choice or action that we take simply trades one set of problems and costs for another. For example, you've heard of the flock cameras, right? These are the cameras that police use for tracking and investigative surveillance and that type of thing. Leftists, they really liked them at one time because they helped big government control the citizenry. Now they're actively working to turn them off because they are being used to deport illegals from the country. There was a trade-off when trying to solve the problem, and that was, our rights and freedoms and things, and then another trade-off when undoing the original trade-off. so you can see the issue here. But the problem with, again, on the flip side, the problem with libertarianism is that when you neuter the government to where it almost really doesn't exist anymore, you create an unbiblical chaos because we are sinful people, right? This is why libertarians usually don't support abortion laws or laws against drug use or things like that, because These involve the government telling individuals what they can and cannot do. But just because you have the liberty to do something doesn't mean you should. I mean, for example, you can find this principle in Romans 14:21, where Paul talks about not doing something that you have the ability to do if it will make someone else stumble. Well, post-libertarianism eventually devolves into authoritarianism, and libertarianism eventually devolves into mob rule. So what should we look to then? If these are two extremes, what should we look to as conservatives? Well, I found this opinion piece by Andrew T. Walker. He is a PhD and is a dean of the School of Theology at the Southern Baptist Theology Seminary, and professor of Christian ethics and public theology. He's also a fellow with the Ethics and Public Policy Center and managing editor of World Opinion. So he's got a lot of hats. Okay, but I kind of like what he had to say, and he starts out by saying this. He says, "I lit a match, threw it on the ground, and walked away." Not literally. On July 29th, I made what I thought was a fairly innocent observation about divides on the political right and closed the app. Unbeknownst to me, what I said engulfed X for the remainder of the week. Only after reopening the app, much later, did I see that so-called official Washington and the conservative commentariat were ablaze about the common good. So, what did I say? I screenshotted a quote from a recent New York Times Magazine piece on how controversies swirling around the Heritage Foundation and the leadership of its president, Kevin Roberts, capture the entire fight on the right in in its simplicity, basically. And as the piece observed, according to Stern, Roberts began to talk around the office, not about individual liberty, but about the common good, not about freedom as the right to do as you want, but as you ought. The incredulous description of Roberts talking about the common good, at least to me, he says, captures the fault line in modern conservatism, where there is such a thing as the common good. And is there? And if so, what's its substance and scope? And what limits should govern its imposition? How you approach the common good tells you where you land on today's conservative spectrum. The thinner ones conception of common good, the more one will migrate toward a politics that focus less on the individual autonomy and more on the intrinsic good necessary for social flourishing, and at least some minimal government backing of them. The common good quarrel on the right hinges on a single question. Does government exist chiefly to secure liberty or to serve the common good? Let me read that again. Okay, this is the question that this hinges on. Does government exist chiefly to secure liberty or serve the common good? Put differently, he says, are political communities meant to erect a few guardrails as possible so diverse people can actualize their choices? Or is the point of society to embody a particular concept of the good life? And should, or how could, the government deploy its power to ensure those ends? Perhaps the general welfare, as the express purpose of government named in our Constitution, deserves more of our attention. even if we ask legitimate questions about the scope of its reach in achieving it. Put more sharply, it is a contest between a thin or absent concept of the common good and a thick one. And to dial down even more, what is the common good and how is it achieved? Definitionally, the common good represents the full ensemble of conditions that allow all of the constructive elements of society to flourish. But the rejoinder says, what does flourish mean in a consent of 340 million variations of the term? And on one side stands what he says, I call drag queen conservatism. Yeah, the view that a genuinely free society will inevitably produce things many of its citizens find repugnant, and that tolerating them is the price of liberty. On this account, the state's job is to maintain the playing field, not referee it, even though eventually it does referee it, because at various points governing authorities do restrict our behaviors. But neutrality is the highest political good. Government lets its citizens order their lives however they want, and any political movement that seeks to advance or subjugate visions of virtue eventually migrates to authoritarianism. On the other side stands the opposite conviction, what I will call, he says, social cohesion conservatism, the view that government can, and at some level, administer a thicker version of human flourishing from the top down. That government exists to make possible the conditions in which the good can be achieved equally by all. Where the first camp fears the state and wants its tentacles reined in, believing it impossible for government to unite 340 million people under a shared horizon, the second is more apt to pick it up and wield it. In the good, if the good is real, the reasoning goes that a good government should promote it. I'll confess, he says, my sympathies run toward the thicker account. I'll say for myself the thinner, but anyway. But without reservations that keep me from adopting a full post-liberal version of it. To put it simply, there are moral conditions, moral goods, and thus moral limits that government must recognize, lest it create the conditions seen in Lord of the Flies. I do not believe society can hang together by minimal standards alone. Such practices as drag queen story hour and recreational drug use are beneath the dignity of any local community, regardless of whether they are freely chosen. I don't care if New Yorkers want legal abortion. There are some ends that government must not allow if government is to be considered just and the public square sane. For me, when societies elect they elect to violate God's natural law, they not only violate moral laws, they deprive themselves of the very foundations that enable their existence and flourishing. A total libertarian, hands-off approach to political orders ventures into a form of moral anarchy. As Vincent Philip Munoz wrote in a recent essay in First Things on the excesses of political liberalism that bleeds into moral license, he says, quote, liberalism so understood is both relativistic and ultimately nihilistic. It makes the individual's will sovereign over reality. It denies the existence of a common good because it holds that there are no rational, instinctive goods that human beings hold in common. The essence of man, in the liberal view, is willful individual choice. asserting one's view of oneself and of reality, and then shaping one's life in light of that posited worldview, unquote. And he says, I agree with Munoz. In my view, man is not made for autonomy alone. And a politics that pretends to be neutral about the human good is not neutral. It is merely smuggling in an account of the common good and disguising which good it is serving. As always, the question is not whether, but which common good will dominate. But here's the challenge for my own side of the ledger, he says. A thick common good is necessary, but I doubt that Washington can meaningfully administer a common good thick enough to bind 340 million people under one moral roof. Why? Well, because society invariably consists in the clash of wills. Conservatives are rightly hesitant about putting that kind of power in the hands of bureaucracies that meddle in our lives and under what they construe as altruistic motives, only to impede liberty in the name of the good. Large scale, top down accounts of the common good, I think, he says, are not merely impractical. They misunderstand where the common good is best activated and realized. The common good is real, but it is best expressed close to the ground in families and congregations and towns and counties and states where people already share a thick sense of what their common life is for. It is far easier to name the good in small communities than in a bureaucracy that spans thousands of miles and millions of people, because the good presupposes a shared story and shared stories thin out of their scale upward. Even while we must concede there are certain basic goods that cannot be willed out of existence in the name of pluralism. All of this is why the common good is best understood as a federalist concept. Alabamans know better than New Yorkers that Alabama should look like, and vice versa. In my view of the common good, it is informed by subsidiary. That's the principle that local levels of social organizations know their own needs better than distant bureaucracies do. The problem, though, is that the modern left harbors no doubts and legislates its own common good under the guise of neutrality. It is pursuing a thick common good with something close to religious fervor, remaking law, medicine, education, and the family in its image. We have laws that tear at the truth of marriage, sanction the amputation of healthy body parts, and allow the murder of children, and let people kill themselves. And so conservatives, skeptical of the common good, are wrong to imagine that neutrality is possible, or that society can hang together by procedure alone. The public square is never empty. Someone's vision of the good always fills it. For conservatives to answer the challenge of libertarianism, of liberalism, with proceduralism alone, with a focus on rules and neutral administration, is voluntarily disarmament, no matter how much one wishes to rise above the fray of cultural war politics. A politics that refuses to name good seeds and the naming to whoever is willing to do it, regardless of whether they call it the common good. So the path forward is neither a federal department of virtue nor a pluralism that pretends the good does not exist. It is one that echoes our original founding, a minimal national scaffolding joined to localism. And the problem at this late hour is that our nation disregards federalism. Court rulings impose degradations and deprivations in the face of local protest. And at the national level, we must assert that no healthy society can do without a true account of the human person, the priority of the family, respect for human rights, the rule of law. That is a floor, not a ceiling. Beneath that floor lies barbarianism, a barbarianism that we now practice. With that floor, though, we can acknowledge that communities remain free to build thicker, to pursue further and more demanding versions of the common life without a distant authority, flattening them into a single uniform shape within reasonable and moral limits. And what a particular community needs is best discerned by those who live there. But we must resist two fantasies at once: that the state can perfect us, and that the state can stay neutral. That's an uncomfortable, perhaps irresolvable tension. The common good is not optional. It is not even avoidable. The only real question is whether conservatives will summon the nerve to name their own. The other shocking and disappointing, he says, response to my ex-post was the incredulous dismissal of the common good by otherwise right-facing pundits. The truth is, everyone relies on some account of the common good, even those who despise the concept. If you believe in property rights, you believe in the common good. Property rights establish the conditions for responsible stewardship, economic cooperation, social stability, and human flourishing. If you believe in unborn children, and the fact that they should not be killed, well, you believe in the common good. You recognize that justice requires protecting innocent human life, especially when it is vulnerable and defenseless. If you believe male and female are objective categories, you believe in the common good. You recognize that society must order itself according to the truth of the human person rather than treating reality as a matter of individual preference. If you think traffic lights are valuable, well, you believe in the common good. You accept reasonable limits on individual freedom so that everyone may travel safely and public life may proceed in an orderly fashion. If you oppose murder, you believe in the common good. You affirm that civil society must protect human life and punish those who unjustly destroy it. If you believe contracts should be honored, you believe in common good because trustworthy promises make economic exchange, institutional cooperation, and ordinary social life possible. If you believe parents have the duties toward their children, then you believe in the common good. The family is not merely a collection of autonomous individuals, but a natural community structured by obligations of love and care and formation. If you believe children should receive an education, whether it's public or private, you believe in the common good. A society has an interest in preparing the next generation to pursue truth and exercise responsibility and participate constructively in communal life. If you believe the government should defend the nation, you believe in common good because political authority exists, in part, to secure the conditions and peace and safety that no individual can provide alone. If you believe courts should administer justice, impartiality, you believe in the common good because the rule of law protects citizens from arbitrary power and perceives a just order shared by all. If you believe pollution may rightly be restricted, you believe in the common good, because individuals and corporations do not have an unlimited right to impose the costs of their conduct on their neighbors. If you believe public parks, roads, and utilities are worthwhile, you believe in the common good. Some goods are enjoyed together and require forms of cooperation that transcend individual consumption. And if you believe citizens owe one another honesty, you believe in the common good. A society cannot sustain trust and deliberation or justice when deception becomes the accepted norm. If you believe that freedom should be ordered toward what is true and good, well, you believe in the common good. Liberty is not merely the absence of restraint, but the social and moral space in which persons and communities may flourish. The real debate, then, is not whether there is a common good. Every political philosophy predisposes one. The debate is over its nature, its scope, who defines it, and what means of political authority may legitimately be employed to secure it. The claim that the common good necessarily breeds authoritarianism, or that it is nothing more than the aggregate of individual choices, thereby justifying anything from drag queen story hour to any other freely chosen social practice like abortion and euthanasia, is simply at odds with the dominant tradition of Christian moral and political thought. The critique says far more about modern assumptions than about the historical understanding of the common good. He says, in my judgment, the common good finds its deepest and most coherent foundation within the Christian doctrine of creation and providence. Christianity understands the common good as a manifestation of God's common grace, by which he not only brought the created order into being, but continually preserves and governs and directs it toward its appointed end. The triune God created all things according to his sovereign wisdom and will, endowing each creature with a nature proper to it, and establishing the moral and societal conditions under which human beings and communities may flourish. The common good, therefore, is not merely a human convention, but but reflects the divinely ordered structures of creation and God's gracious providential care for all people. A couple of proposals for moving forward. If you favor the idea of common good, be specific on what that means and what it does not mean. Ensure skeptics that the common good is not simply a symptom for one's chosen utopia delivered through government decree. And if you shudder at the term, give clear limits on what you think the government can do and what culture can absorb in the name of liberty. As a Christian theologian, he says, I see this as the theological reality as much as a political one. It is continually pressed upon me that navigating fallen political orders after Genesis 3 is a constant tension in cultivating an order that does not harden into tyranny, managed alongside a twin, temptation, appropriating liberty without collapsing into license. Be clear which side of the ordered liberty ledger you're on. Are you more prone to the need for order or more concerned about preserving liberty? Regardless of where you fall, be ready to explain your limits in both directions. In developing an account of the common good that preserves order, without extinguishing liberty, and liberty without dissolving order. 2 books, Robert P. George's Making Men Moral and John Finney's Natural Law and Natural Rights, have been the most decisive for me. He says, together they chart a middle course between libertarianism and post-liberalism. Perfectionist in affirming genuine moral goods that law must protect and positively advance. Principled in the defending civil liberties that permit public contention over those goods, and prudential in recognizing that counterfeit goods eventually confront a community authorized to determine what it tolerates, regulates, or prohibits. This George and Ryan T. Anderson have a helpful essay that distills the paradigm of those books. So he says, I am happy to accept that the common good is a contested category, as he puts it. And he concludes and he says its scope, its substantive ends, and the limits of its political enforcement are all rightly debated. But the common good is among the oldest concept in both classical and Christian political thought. Its cynical demonization, its reduction to individual autonomy, or its dismissal of conservatives is an indictment of modern conservatism, not the common good. So I wanted to bring that to you. I wanted to share that with you today because I do see that we are seeing a war within conservatism, and it's currently between the post-liberals and the libertarians. Biblically, the right answer probably is somewhere in the middle. But I would like to hear what you think on it. And of course, you can always do that at uncommonsensepodcast.com. Also, going to our YouTube page, liking and sharing also helps. And thank you for listening.
This podcast is a production of Morganite Communications.